All right, folks, welcome to Nino's Corner.tv. This is the YouTube version. We just did the dirty version on Nino's Corner.tv. That was about 45 minutes long, and I think you dropped a lot of good insight and information on there. That's on Nino's Corner.tv, folks. This will be the edited version. Hopefully, I don't need to send this one editing, but Jim Willie is going to give us his perspective of the battlefront, the financial battlefront through his eyes, and he's an expert on this. I trust him fully. So, Jim, thank you for joining me. Also, he's the newsletter editor of golden-jackass.com, golden-jackass.com. But before you get started, Jim, let me knock this out. Virtual Shield 1, folks, Virtual Shield 1. Millions of Americans' personal data is being exposed in a global cyber attack. Both the United States government and its citizens are being hit with massive global attacks that's reportedly exploiting a vulnerability in widely used software. It's believed that Chinese or Russian-affiliated hackers, and I have questions about that, are behind the attacks in an espionage attempt. What's worse is that hundreds of organizations around the world have been hit with the same cyber attack. This is why I highly recommend Virtual Shield 1, folks. I use it I will use it on my computer. I use it on my cell phone. Virtual Shield 1 helps securely protect your data from cyber attacks like this one and many others, including data leaks. Everyone should use this protection suit because it allows you to browse the web with confidence and protect your online identity, which is more important now than ever. This comprehensive solution includes Virtual Shield 1 VPN, identity protection, social security protection, dark web monitoring, malware, and ad blocking, fast speeds, and an ability to help remove your name from the internet and anonymity for all-around security and privacy. Sign up for Virtual Shield 1 using my link down below. Hit the link below, folks, and get a 60-day risk-free trial of Virtual Shield 1, which comes with unlimited access to Virtual Shield's VPS across all your devices, malware, and ad blocking, identity protection, 1 million in insurance, 24/7 customer support, and much, much more. Go to Virtual Shield 1, folks. Hit the link below and get yourself started with this. Trust me, it's worth it. I use it. That's how I started a second YouTube channel. All right, Jim, let's get started.
Yeah.
So what's your perspective of what's going on? I know we went over a lot on Nino's Corner.tv. There's a lot we just dived into, but let's make this YouTube friendly.
And let me focus on the internal U.S. dollar and banking and bond problem and the external U.S. Treasury bond problem. Okay, I'll start with internal. There have been numerous signals in the last several weeks that there's a lot of trouble in the U.S. government financial room. Numerous individual items, like the Federal Reserve has informed the Department of Treasury that they no longer have any income to share. Everything they have is a loser. It's a result of raising interest rates. There's a very big item, and that is canceled, delayed, and failed Treasury auctions. Okay, this has never happened before. They've done delays, but we've never seen anything like this. It has been said that there are no buyers now for any of the G7 nations' sovereign bonds. All the major nations are having difficulty selling their version of sovereign bond. Ours is called Treasury bond. In England, it's called the UK gilt. In Germany, it's called the Bund. There have been announcements of yield curve control. And that is their, let's just say, timid way of calling more quantitative easing. We are buying our own debt. Yield curve control is buying the long end, selling the short end, or reverse in order to avoid a flattened curve. There are so many individual stories. We are raising interest rates, which raises the commodity prices, and that brings about greater deficits. We had a debt ceiling argument, debate a month and a half, 2 months ago. And it went on a lot longer than it should have. And the inside scoop is it went longer because there might have been an undeclared default of the US government debt. So behind closed doors, there was a what moment, and that's what caused some delays from the shock. We must continue deficit spending or the entire economy will grind to a halt rather quickly. So we're in a bad spot here domestically. There's another hint. The primary bond dealers are under contract to buy whatever treasury bonds are not sold at auctions. Well, jeepers, does that not mean they have to buy almost everything? So there are hidden arrangements with the Fed to buy the treasuries that very few bidders are buying. We're in trouble on the home front with treasury bonds. Furthermore, Japan dumped $250 billion in a 12-month period of treasury bonds. Okay, we're not able to sell new treasury bonds, yet every 6 months or so, we're racking up another trillion in debt. Now, these are not censorable comments. These are black and white, real comments. I'm keeping it clean, and this is real. The US government debt is in trouble. The deficits cannot be financed. We're going to monetize it ourselves, and we're going to get a reputation of running a Zimbabwe dollar operation. And a lot of people inside the United States don't quite comprehend this. They think, well, the dollar's all powerful. Oh, really? We're not able to conduct treasury auctions. We just canceled a few. We delayed and delayed. We had one and it wasn't very successful. Okay, there's a lot going on. And just amidst all that, the plan of the JP Morgan super bank seems to be stalled. I think it's derailed, but let's just call it stalled, because JP Morgan might have a bad case of indigestion after taking Silicon Valley Bank, First Heritage Bank, and First Republic Bank.
So you're saying
this
is stalled. It's stopped right now. We would have seen it persist and just take off like gangbusters if it was really going to happen, right? We would see it now.
I haven't seen any more acquisitions by JP Morgan for over 2 months.
So what does that mean? Does that mean the big banks? So that's a halt in their plan for the big banks to gobble up the small banks and then switches to the digital dollar?
Yeah, I think it is a big delay, and it brings up an interesting point. It's called a federal bank term. I can't remember the proper name. It's a new name. It's a term limit banking facility. I call it the waiting room for bankruptcy. If they're having heavy activity in the temporary funding term limit facility, that means they're about to announce their bankruptcy in the following weeks because they can't manage things. There's a gigantic increase in the term limit facility usage, which means that a lot of banks are drawing on credit. It's really just borrowing money from the Fed. Some use the word funny money, but I don't know whether it's a borrowing or whether it's a gift or whether it's monopoly money being spewed about. But we have big problems. Okay, I want to focus on the main, not so much, real estate and commercial loans and mortgages. I want to focus on U.S. government, the debt, the deficit, the bonds, financing, the big banks. They're all in trouble. They're all in very big trouble. And it's not sustainable. Some people, I think, very myopically, like Mr. Magoo, think, well, golly, it'll all work out in a few months. No, not this time. Not this time. We're not working it out. Okay, that's the domestic side in a nutshell. And I'm leaving a lot out. I'm leaving a tremendous amount of details out. But the point is that we're running up deficits of $1 trillion every 6 months. We had a sequence of presidencies that doubled the debt. The foreigners are now thinking and saying we'll never be repaid for our debt, for our bonds. We own your debt.
Making them switch to the yuan.
The switch to the yuan, switch to gold. the foreigners are quite critical. I'm migrating now to the foreign side. They're quite critical of the U.S. treasuries and the issuance. And I heard a story and I did not get a follow-up. Nino, I do my best. I say, if you can follow up on that, if there's anything more down the road, like in a couple of days, let me know. And then I ask other people, did you hear anything about that? So I'm trying to get an echo. I heard that there were some foreign entities that sold a batch of treasury bonds for 40 cents on the dollar. Okay, I think we're in default right now.
So we're in free fall right now.
Yeah, but it's not very well identified. Free fall is a colloquial term. Let's just keep it clean. We're in big, big trouble, and we might have entered the early stages of debt default. I think this debt ceiling controversy went on for a long time because of the debt default. The treasury bonds now, we have to buy them ourselves. You can't just say it's a bad sign. It's endemic of something. Why are we buying our own debt? Because nobody else wants it. One guy told me a few days ago, a smart client, and I heard this from one of my colleagues, the U.S. government will never permit a debt default. Well, okay, we just print money to cover it. What if no one wants it? No one wants a treasury bond. Fine, we don't have a default. We have a Mickey Mouse bond. And remember, our dollar is built upon the bond foundation. The dollar is built upon the bond foundation. So if we have a rejected bond, what's our currency? Okay, we're in big, big trouble. We cannot finance our debt. We're having a war with the European banks. We're raising rates to harm European banks because we're at risk of derivative failure for the bonds. Interest rate swaps are called. We're trying to get the Europeans to default on their derivatives first. Okay, we're in trouble. We're trying to get them harmed before us, so some of their trillions can come to our banks and buy us more time. We're in big trouble in bond land and bank land. Oh my gosh.
So this to me is like when I was like a kid and my dad would say, I'm going to whip you with the belt. And I would try to buy time by like running around the table or like go hiding in the closet or something. Still come and get me. I still got the ass whooping. I mean, it still happens. So that's where we're at right now. We're running around the table. We're doing distractions. We're trying to get away from the inevitable.
Yeah. And if you like that analogy, let me run with it. And there are many other persons running around the table, and they're pushing us out of the room. And that is where the big risk is, because we use treasury bills, Nino, treasury bills, the short term, to pay for import.
Let's talk about for a second on here on the YouTube channel, which we went into great detail on my Nino's Corner.tv, but let's talk for a second on how they're going to come after our money, the IRS agents. How are they going to come after our money? You said 20% of our bank accounts will be a fee to switch over to this new currency. I mean, how is this going to work?
Okay, first of all, I don't have a lot of faith. I'm not sure at all that we're going to go to a digital currency in the United States, because a digital currency, you cannot say, well, this is only going to be used for domestic purposes. Well, you can't control the border. Someone has a digital currency and he's got access while he's in England and they want to use it. There's no border for a digital currency. I don't think we're going to go there. If we did, it would be forced to get that 20% fee. All right, you got $100,000, flat number out there. You got $100,000 and you got 3 bank accounts. Well, now you got 80 in 3 bank accounts, and that's the fee that they said was for the overhead and for the services and all the, paying for the function and paying for the foundation and paying for the equipment. And it's all bullshit. Sorry. I don't believe it's legitimate. All right. I think it's more like a tax. I'm getting into some touchy ground here, but you know, you brought this up, Nino.
I know. Let's say,
over.
well, let's just leave that for Nino's. Leave that for the .tv,
let
man,
me
because I don't want to.
Let me just close that little open book by saying I'm not so sure foreign nations will accept our digital currency, and I'm not sure that it would last really long, even domestically inside the United States. I think it's got a lot of problems, and let's just leave it at that. Let me go over to my foreign side here, because this is where it gets really interesting, really dicey, really fast. The center of global payment systems has a nucleus of energy, oil and gas. And gas has, you know, the regular gaseous type, but also liquefied natural gas. 2 months ago, it was sometime around May or so, I'm not exactly sure, April and May, the Chinese and the Saudis worked a deal, and the Saudis announced that they were going to accept Chinese yuan for their oil shipments and for their petrochemical shipments. And then it became quite obvious that they were soft soaping it. And with the Saudis and the UAE, that's their cousins joined at the hip. Saudi is a big population. UAE is a big producer of oil, but a small population. They got 7 little like city states. They call them the Emirates. The Saudis and the UAE really announced that they're ditching and abandoning the petrodollar. They're not going to, on a widespread basis, they now want yuan. They now want Chinese yuan.
So it's game over.
And it got, I think it is. And let me explain why, because this has got many moving parts and they're all connected. First of all, whatever the Saudis and UAE do, the rest of the Gulf does. The oil producers of Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait announced they're all in for the yuan. What they've done is that they've announced the end of the petrodollar. The Saudis announced the end of the petrodollar. I'm repeating myself because it's so important. Now, look for evidence. In France, 2 months ago, they had a big UAE gas deal in the form of LNG, and the contract is for payment in yuan. France has a deal to pay the Gulf Arabs for gas in yuan. Oh my gosh. So there are 2 sides to the spread. Whatever the Saudi UAE team does, the entire Gulf monarchies do. And extend that up to Iraq. They're now doing yuan. They're not doing any dollar. They actually, in Iraq, removed all the dollars in their banking system. Okay, that's the Gulf Arab phenomenon. Furthermore, the Saudis are the lead dog in OPEC, Saudi and UAE. So now all the non-Arab nations like Venezuela, Nigeria, and Indonesia, they're also going to the yuan. What we've got now is a falling of all the dominoes in the Gulf Arab region and in the OPEC region, the OPEC cartel. They're all now full on yuan. Now, Americans might think, well, gee, that's interesting. Well, it's far more than interesting, because a country like France, if they have more oil shipments from Saudi UAE, they're going to be in yuan. And if they've got others, say from Iraq, a little bit, small percentage, that's going to be in yuan. So guess what France is going to do in their banking system? They're going to divest treasury bonds, and they're going to buy no more. That's an ally. Nino, I bring up France because that's an ally. That is danger land, danger. They're not going to buy any more treasury bonds. This is an ally. So what has happened with the Saudi announcement, we're going full on with the petro yuan, is that all of their customers, all their client states will divest treasury bonds and not buy anymore.
So
that means we're very, very close to a formal debt default. for the
What
bond.
is it? What about our ports here in America? I know we talked about this on Nino's Corner.tv, and I know we could talk about it here. What about our ports here in America if our dollar's no good? What about the ports for imports?
The unit of importance, let's just focus on Long Beach, California. The unit is the Treasury bill. Okay, if someone is looking to get paid for a shipment coming into Long Beach, they're not going to want to become a bond investor. They want like a 3-month Treasury bill or a 1-month Treasury bill. And it's considered cash. I know it's not cash, but it's considered cash because you got a very short term period where you can bring it back to your home currency and remove it from your books. So it acts like cash, but it's really not cash because it's so short term. Now, that's just definition. In Long Beach, I'm hearing, I gotta be careful with my words here. I'm hearing that in Long Beach, the countries sending us product are not accepting the Treasury bill, and we're in a tough spot.
Oh boy.
And I'm very careful with my words. We're being told, now it's up to you to believe it or not, we're being told that the problem in Long Beach is a dock worker strike. We're being told that. So let's leave that because it's controversial.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
The Treasury bill is the unit for cash payment in trade. And I'm not very clear or confident that it will continue to be in widespread usage, which means all those countries that are shipping to the US, they're going to be accumulating Chinese yuan, Chinese bonds, because they're going to get ready for their next oil shipment. It's like 30% of global payments are for oil and gas, 30%. So it's a dominant piece, and that's why OPEC is so important. And remember, OPEC is a lot more than Gulf Arabs. I mentioned them: Indonesia, Venezuela, Nigeria. That's Asia, Africa, South America. They follow the Saudis, and guess who's running that show but Russia? They sometimes use a term called OPEC plus. The plus is for Russia. And, the plus you'd think is like an attachment. Oh, right. No. They're holding the leash. They're holding the reins. Russia's running OPEC. And Russia was involved in the decision with Saudi to go full petro-yuan. This is, unfortunately for the United States, is Russian vengeance. Okay? Now, leave Ukraine out of the picture entirely. I have no interest at all in talking about it. What Russia's doing right now is they're imposing their will with OPEC, which they have control over, and China is at their side. We have two very large adversaries now, Russia and China, and we cannot win a financial war with them. What we can do is win a standoff, and this is where I differ from a lot of people, a lot of analysts. Some analysts say that the dollar will never lose its place. Others are saying the dollar is going to just completely go away and be discarded. I'm saying something different that I'm surprised others are not saying, Nino. The dollar is going to have to share the stage. In global trade for payments, it'll be the yuan, it'll be the dollar, and in their own little corner, it'll be the Russian ruble. Nothing is going to stop the Russians from using the ruble with all this, the former Soviet republics, the stands, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, the stands. Okay, they'll be using the ruble, they'll be using whatever they choose, a digital version. Well, I don't know, I don't care. I do care, but I'm not going to focus on it in this conversation. The point is that the oil trade is going to dictate banking policy for our allied nations, and they're going to divest the Treasury bond. And in order to prevent some big problems, both with the market with bonds and with, say, diplomatic relations, at the point of a gun, they're not going to dump their Treasury bonds real fast in a divestiture. They're going to hang on to some, And I think they're going to lie about how quickly they're going to sell their treasury bonds. Okay, watch France, because France is falling apart. The one country in France that is in absolute turmoil, I don't want to get into details, but France is upside down. Their police are not behind the government now. This is a very dangerous situation. So watch their banks. Watch it, see if they go full on yuan. Watch if they announce a big oil deal with
So
Iraq.
we could be France in the next few months with the chaos that's hitting there, right? I mean, with the way this is projected.
It could be. Yeah, Nino, it could be. But remember, when we're throwing volleys out at the European banks, we're going to be encouraging some of their money to fly over here.
So right now we're just prolonging the inevitable. It's coming.
There's no stopping it.
Good.
And when I read in April that the Saudis were going full on petro yuan, my conclusion was it's game over, just a matter of time, game over. This is it, because it's 30% of the global trade. Banking systems cater to energy. What will France do if they cannot get their oil and gas imports? They'll fold, collapse. So they're going to cater to their energy purchases, and that means they're going to alter their banking policy. They're not going to be buying any treasury bonds. They sold, here's just a hint. Last year, when Japan sold $238 billion over a 12-month period of treasury bonds, France sold 70.
Jeez.
Wow.
It's just terrifying.
This is our ally.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Yes. Yes. And, you know, we got to be careful, but let's just say that we are prolonging the inevitable. The inevitable is a bond default, but it's not going to be called a default. It's going to be a boycott. I'm calling it the bond boycott. We're not going to have any buyers, and we're going to go Zimbabwe and print money and cover it. We're going to monetize. Hey, look, we've already gone through a 10-year period. It's called quantitative easing. It's all out there in the public domain. Quantitative easing is a nice name for printing an excess of money and not doing sterilized monetization, sterilized purchasing of your own debt. We did not sterilize, which meant.
So how much time? How much time do you think we got, Jim? Like, if you had to guess, like, how much time do we got till it's really bad, like France bad?
I don't know. I want to give you
not years, obviously not years. We're talking
Nino,
months.
I want to give you a sassy answer. It depends on how you define pie. Hey, I know. I'm playing with you. If you try to get a serious answer out of the Department of Treasury at a federal open market committee meeting, you do not get one. If you ask them, when are you going to stop raising interest rates? They won't tell you. If you try to read the tea leaves with the Fed funds futures, you don't get a really good indication. You get changing winds there. If you ask them, how are you managing the money supply, they'll change topic and talk about the yield curve control. So when you're wondering how much time do we have before we go Mad Max like France and the United States, I say it depends on how you define pie. I mean, I don't really know, but you're a big guy. If you put me in a headlock and you said, Jim, you got to give me an answer before I let you out where you can breathe easy, I would say before the end of the year, I don't see things holding together.
That's exactly what I'm hearing from other people, man. But you're putting it into
now. I've done other talks where I bring out my 8 vectors, like closing in on Biden with documents, whatever. The treasury bonds having trouble with the auctions, foreign selling a treasury bond, the big banks really indicating their insolvency, awareness on health matters, far more awareness, the foreigners working on a de-dollarized concept, foreign allied nations making deals with the Gulf Arabs, everything in my vectors. And now remember, in your mathematics, a vector is a direction and a magnitude. It's an arrow that has like a length. All my vectors, and this is not a hard science, it's not a strict, all my vectors are pointing to September, October, November.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that some of the vectors seem to be suspended. Okay, well, that was an issue 4 months ago. Not a whole lot of progress on that. What seems to be suspended right now is the big bank problems. And I'm careful with my words. The crisis among big banks, and they're pointing to things like, you know, commercial real estate and commercial mortgages and difficulty in that, and home mortgage applications that are 90% rejected. Okay, if the banks are seeing these symptoms, then my personal belief in a direct logical sequence is the big banks are in big trouble, not because of their symptoms. The symptoms are showing because they're in big trouble.
Jim, where can people find you?
Time?
golden-jackass.com. Folks, go to Nino's Corner to get the real in-depth, dirty version of this. We call it the dirty version.
And I gotta say that I don't use vulgarity like my host.
All right. Well, Jim, I love having you on, man. This is the YouTube version. Folks, we go in depth in Nino's Corner.tv. We talk about things you would never hear on here. And then he takes us down the rabbit hole. I think you took us pretty far down the rabbit hole.
I did my best in exposing some very high risk elements to our global situation. And it's mostly financial. I didn't talk about war. I didn't talk about war at all. This is all finance, and it's all collapse of what I call the king dollar era.
All right. I'm going to put this up on YouTube tonight, Jim. So let me get busy on it. Thank you. golden-jackass.com, folks. He's the editor of the newsletter there. golden-jackass.com. Jim, thank you.
Thanks. And, you know, I also have consult services, and I make it very easy for wealthy people to help me out with a sponsor. And I got a couple this week, Nino, and I tell you, I fell to my knees. Yeah. That's how rough my time is. Thanks for having me on.
You do amazing work. You do amazing work, and I love having you on. Let's get you on in about another week. What do you think?
Another week?
Yeah, in about a week. About a week or two. Let's talk about.
All right. I don't like bugging you, but if
no,
you like that,
you don't bug me. Jim.
Let me know.
You don't bug me.
Just let me know.
All right, Jim. Thank you.